Hey everybody, so we are going to be talking about agents of disease and infectious diseases. And so to kind of warm up in engaging our skills and our knowledge in this area of talking about pathogens, and these are the things that cause disease, they're called pathogens. We're going to talk specifically about a certain kind of pathogen, and this would be a virus. And with that, we all have some prior knowledge about the coronavirus. And so we're going to be reading an article about the coronavirus. And prior to reading this text, I'm going to be modeling a type of pre-reading strategy that we can use to engage our prior knowledge in a subject. So this can be used outside of just this article, but it's going to engage our prior knowledge and help us to establish relationships between important words and ideas in the article prior to reading it. So it kind of helps us get some good background moving into the topic. And so this strategy is called clustering and mapping. And so we're going to make a concept map. As you can see here, I'm in PowerPoint and I've got a circle in the middle, and I'm going to put kind of the main word from this article that we're going to read about COVID in the middle, and I'm going to branch out with some connecting ideas about the biology of coronavirus. So let's go to our article. All right, and it is called Profile of a Killer, the Complex Biology Powering the Coronavirus Pandemic. The introduction says scientists are piecing together how SARS-CoV-2 operates, where it came from, and what it might do next. But pressing questions remain about the source of COVID-19. So here we've got a nice picture. We can see the virus in the middle. We've got a bat here. They believe that coronavirus came from bats. We've got lungs. We know that it can really hurt lungs and have long-term damage. Face masks we see, face shields, all kinds of different things here. Somebody in a hospital not doing so well. So there's just a lot of different things in this image that engage our prior knowledge of COVID-19 and what a virus is. All right, with that, let's move into talking about kind of what we're going to do in building this concept map. So the big word that sticks out to me when I look at this article and what it's about is that it's talking about COVID-19. And so that's going to be our center word. We call this the nucleus word when we're making a cluster or concept map. So COVID-19 at the center. And what's something that comes to mind first when I think about COVID-19? Well, I think that it's a virus. So we talked about at the beginning how viruses are a type of pathogen, and that's something that will cause disease. And so COVID-19 is a virus. All right, what else do I know about viruses? Well, I know that viruses are microscopic, really tiny. So we'll make a box here, microscopic. Perfect. So viruses are microscopic, and a little bit of controversy comes in with this because I know that people talk about how they hate wearing masks and they don't even work. And if viruses are microscopic, then they probably can get through a mask. So should we be wearing masks? Do they help? Well, probably they do, but they're not perfect. So that's an area of controversy that I know about when talking about a virus and the coronavirus. And then another thing I know is that viruses are considered to be non-living. And this is really weird, isn't it? How can something be non-living and yet kill so many people? Well, according to sort of the scientific and biological definition of life, you need to be made of cells and be able to replicate on your own. And viruses can't replicate on their own. They require a host cell, and that's why they infect us, so that they can replicate and survive, although they're non-living. So that's kind of, we'll put a question mark here because it's kind of confusing. Another thing that we know about viruses, that we know that there's a lot of different types of coronaviruses. It's a whole family of viruses. And one thing about coronaviruses that is kind of the reason why they're named corona is because they've got little spikes. If we go back, these little spikes coming out, and the word corona stands for crown or spikes. So that's sort of the namesake of the coronavirus. All right, what's something else we know about COVID-19? Well, we know that it's had a huge impact on human health. All right, and some of the things specifically, it affects the lungs. We know there can be long-term damage to lungs. Also, we know loss of taste is a problem, coughing, and fever. These are all things we know about coronavirus. So we'll make some connections here in our web. Maybe. All right. So coronavirus affects human health, and it particularly affects the lungs. But actually, it's interesting. It doesn't just affect human health, because we know that, or I guess it's hypothesized and theorized that it came from bats. The novel coronavirus came from bats. And that's sort of, oops, still a letter there, originated in bats. Sort of an interesting thing. Based on some research that's been done, we can say that that's probably where it came from, although that maybe isn't universally accepted. It's probably the case. All right, so another thing we know about COVID-19 is that it's a worldwide thing, and that's why we call it a pandemic. It's affected the entire world. Pretty much every country in the world has felt the effects of it. So it's a pandemic, and a pandemic is a worldwide epidemic. That's what that stands for. Pandemic. All right. And an epidemic is an outbreak of cases. So COVID-19 is a pandemic, which is a worldwide outbreak of cases in a number of different locations and places throughout the world. It's also had a huge social impact. So when we talk about the social impact of COVID-19, I'm going to make this a big box because there's plenty to talk about. Social impact. Well, we know that there was the whole quarantine in 2020, and we were on lockdown, and it was kind of crazy because you could only leave your house to get groceries and things like that, and it wasn't a very fun time. We know face masks are still sort of a hot topic, and people are wearing those still, and it's become political as well, and affecting the current presidential election even as a topic to be talked about. Some people think that President Trump has handled this pandemic really well. Others say, he's not done a very good job, and that's why we need somebody else in office. And so we know all these things about COVID-19, and this kind of makes some connections with what we expect when we read this article about COVID, and as we're preparing to learn more about the biology of COVID-19, we'll learn more about what a virus is and where COVID came from. We talked about originated in bats, and so this has done a nice job to engage our prior knowledge with the topic of COVID-19. And so I would encourage you to think about your own knowledge related to COVID to help develop your own concept map prior to reading the article. So that's what we're going to be moving into, and you can use clustering and mapping to create important connections between sort of key concepts and key words that you see when looking at the title, the subheading, and this cover picture. And then we'll be able to move into reading the article. All right, so that's what we're going to be doing in this lesson.